Good evening. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. In a dramatic policy response to what's being called a national emergency, the Kenyan government has announced that all short stay rentals and commercial lodgings will be required to install CCTV cameras. This sweeping mandate comes directly from State House, following President William Ruto's receipt of a devastating report on gender-based violence. The report draws a direct, and for many, undeniable link between these temporary accommodations and the brutal murders of Kenyan women. Tonight, we take a deep dive into the alarming statistics that triggered this action, the fierce debate over privacy versus security, the practical challenges of implementation, and what this means for the future of safety in Kenya. I'm your host, and this is our special 12-minute investigation. Let's begin with the numbers that shocked the nation. The report presented to President Ruto, compiled by a multi-agency task force, covers a 3-year period from 2022 to 2024. The headline figure is stark and horrifying. 1,639 women were killed in incidents of gender-based violence. That's an average of more than one woman murdered every single day for 3 years. But the breakdown of this figure reveals even more disturbing patterns. The report indicates that 77% of these women were killed by intimate partners or people they knew. This statistic shatters the common misconception of stranger danger, pointing the finger squarely at domestic spaces and relationships of trust. The data gets more specific. Women between the ages of 30 and 44 were identified as the demographic hit hardest by this violence. This is the core of Kenya's workforce: mothers, professionals, and community leaders. Geographically, the crisis is not evenly distributed. 3 counties emerged as epicenters of the femicide wave. Nairobi County, as the capital and most populous region, recorded the highest absolute numbers. Nakuru County and Meru County followed closely, indicating this is both an urban and a burgeoning county-town issue. The report's authors didn't just stop at cataloging the deaths. They conducted forensic and investigative analysis of crime scenes and patterns. Their conclusion was that a significant and growing proportion of these murders, particularly those involving intimate partners, were occurring in short-stay rentals, Airbnb apartments, and commercial lodging facilities. These locations, they argue, offer a degree of anonymity and detachment that facilitates premeditated violence and complicates police investigations. This brings us to the government's proposed solution: mandatory CCTV. Directive states that all registered short-term rental properties and lodgings must install functioning surveillance cameras at all entry and exit points. The footage must be stored for a minimum of 30 days and be made available to law enforcement upon request. Failure to comply will result in the revocation of operating licenses and significant fines. Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki, in announcing the policy, framed it as a necessary tool for deterrence and evidence collection. He stated, and I quote, "We are turning the lights on in the darkest corners. These cameras will serve as silent witnesses, ensuring that perpetrators can no longer hide in the shadows of anonymous rooms." The government's position is clear: the right to life and security, especially for women, trumps any concerns about privacy in these commercial spaces. But this policy has ignited a fiery debate. Supporters, led by women's rights organizations and survivors groups, have hailed it as a long overdue intervention. Beatrice from the Coalition Against Gender-Based Violence told us, "For years, these places have been black boxes where our sisters disappear. The state has a duty to regulate spaces that are being used as murder chambers. If you have nothing to hide as a legitimate business, you should have no problem with a camera at your gate." They argue that the privacy of guests is already limited in commercial settings, and that this measure is no different from CCTV in supermarkets or banks, a security feature, not an intrusion. On the other side, a powerful coalition of critics has emerged. This includes the Kenya Short-Term Rental Association, digital rights activists, and some constitutional lawyers. Their concerns are multifaceted. First, the privacy argument. John, a digital rights advocate, poses this question: where does it end? If the state can mandate cameras in a private rental, what's to stop them from demanding them in every living room under the guise of security? We are creating a surveillance architecture that could be easily abused. Second, there's the immense practical and financial burden. Installing compliant CCTV systems with 30-day storage is expensive. Jane, who manages 3 Airbnb units in Kilimani, estimates the cost at over 100,000 shillings per unit. "This will crush small owners," she says. "The big hotels can absorb it, we cannot. Are they trying to kill this entire sector?" Third, and perhaps most critically, is the question of efficacy. Does placing a camera at a gate actually prevent violence that is planned and executed inside a room by someone known to the victim? Dr. Amani, a criminologist we spoke to, is skeptical. This is a reactive, not a proactive measure, she explains. It helps you solve a crime after the fact, which is valuable, but does it deter a determined, intimate partner killer? That person is often in a state of rage or obsession where the thought of a camera is irrelevant. We are treating the symptom, the location, not the disease, which is deep-seated misogyny and toxic masculinity. She argues for parallel, massive investment in psychosocial support, hotlines, shelters, and economic empowerment for women at risk. Let's examine the implementation challenge. Kenya has thousands of registered and unregistered short-term rentals. The regulatory capacity of agencies like the Tourism Regulatory Authority is already stretched thin. Enforcing this mandate nationwide will be a Herculean task. Will there be a certification process for camera systems? Who will have access to the live feeds or the stored data? The policy announcement was light on these operational details, leading to fears of a chaotic rollout that either fails or becomes corrupt. There's also a significant data security risk. A centralized database of CCTV feeds from private residences, even commercial ones, is a prime target for hackers and could lead to horrific invasions of privacy if breached. Furthermore, critics point to potential unintended consequences. Could this push the illicit use of these spaces underground? If regulation becomes too onerous, owners might simply not register their properties, creating an even less monitored shadow market. Alternatively, perpetrators might simply shift locations, moving their violence to private, permanent homes where no cameras are mandated. This raises the fundamental question: is this policy a targeted solution or a broad, politically expedient reaction to a complex social problem? Understand the scale? Let's look at some comparative numbers. The report's figure of 1,639 femicides over 3 years is devastating. But let's put it in a regional context. While comprehensive continental data is hard to pin down, Kenya's rate is alarmingly high. A 2023 study by the African Population and Health Research Center suggested that intimate partner violence prevalence in Kenya is above the sub-Saharan African average. The government's own data from the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey has consistently shown that about 40% of women have experienced physical or sexual violence from an intimate partner. The new femicide report puts the most extreme, lethal outcome of that statistic into horrifying relief. The political context is also crucial. President Ruto is in the first year of his first term. Facing economic headwinds, this clear, decisive action on a visceral issue like the safety of women allows his administration to project strength and moral clarity. It's a policy that is easily communicated and, on the surface, difficult to oppose. The optics of cracking down on venues of violence are powerful. However, if the implementation is botched, or if the violence continues unabated in other locations, the policy could backfire, seen as an expensive failure that infringed on rights for no tangible gain. So where does this leave us? The CCTV mandate for short-stay rentals is now official government policy. It represents a watershed moment in Kenya's approach to gender-based violence, moving the discussion firmly into the realm of state-mandated surveillance of private commercial spaces. The coming months will be critical. We will be watching for the publication of detailed regulations, the budget allocated for enforcement, and the response from the hospitality and tech sectors. More importantly, we will be monitoring the hardest metric of all: will the number of women killed by intimate partners in Kenya go down? This debate encapsulates a modern dilemma: security versus privacy, quick fixes versus deep social change, and the role of the state in regulating private behavior for the public good. The women of Kenya, whose lives are literally on the line, deserve a solution that works. Whether CCTV cameras are a key part of that solution or a costly distraction remains to be seen. What is undeniable is that the status quo, represented by those 1,639 lost lives, is intolerable. The conversation has started, but the hard work is just beginning. For Kenya News Update today, this has been a deep dive into one of the most pressing issues facing our nation. We've presented the numbers, the arguments for and against, and the challenges ahead. The story is still developing, and we will continue to follow it closely. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe to Kenya News Update today for more in-depth reporting. Good night.